talk today about Diego Franco and his work.
What first attracted me about his work is just the use of like all these different components. Not only the typography is really interesting by how it's being kind of like chopped up. We get some words that have hyphens in them as a design element, some words that kind of go off the page a little bit. And then the mix of like these kind of aggressive marks, right? We got some bullet holes, we have some blood marks and stuff like that. When we have images, like it's really hard to arrange images and type together to make it not seem boring, right? If you have just like a rectangular image, what do you do with the copy? It just seems like it's floating on the page. What do you do? But he does this nice job of having some text overlap and having part of the image go off the page and then reappear on the other side. This is like really like nitpicky design that when it's done well is so good. When we're looking at the piece, there's an address and a website that's there and it's vertical, and there's a logo down at the bottom that's also vertical. It's filling this empty space that if it wasn't there, the piece would fall apart and wouldn't work. So it's like 2 lines of super small copy is balancing the whole entire piece. And that to me is like really fascinating. And that's when design is like at its best. When you don't know that it's there, you're not feeling it's off. You just know that it feels in the right place and at the right moment. And that's what good design should be about.
Yeah, and the fact to make it the logo and the like the website address of the client that he's doing that for, that's impressive to know that like, okay, this is probably the most important aspect and I'll put it in a place that's going to be prominent without distracting from the message.
And I think that's what a lot of design forgets almost, is that it's like, just because you have a logo of the company doesn't mean it needs to be enormous, right? If it's in a place that I'm going to look, it could be the smallest possible size because I'm going to look there because you've done a good job of designing that I'm going to look there.
How hard is it to like recognize, like, is it something that you innately have to understand when a composition feels balanced, or is there tricks that you can learn or guidelines that can be used to help inform?
Yeah, that's like a loaded question because it's like composition in art in itself, composition is key, but even in design, like composition is what it's about. It's training yourself to look at elements as places that fill up the page, places that gain my attention, places that pull me around. It's like, you need to know the psychology of how my brain is working to understand how I'm going to move across a page. If I put red in the top right corner and put it also in the lower left-hand corner, you're going to make a diagonal line because your brain is seeing those 2 colors. There are these principles, right? I don't need to go into them, but they're called Gestalt principles that detail that. It started off as a psychology movement and was moved into design, right? It's all how humans interact with things, and designers said, hey, wait, this makes perfect sense with what we're doing. Let's apply that to art and design. And that's one of the principles we learn starting off in design. It's a really hard concept. Intro classes should just hammer you on composition. Like that's key. And so now you need to look at what space you are using and not what the image is, but where's the space that it's taking up. Because if you can design it in blocks and shapes, you can design anything then at that moment. If you're looking at lines of type as literal lines, you see how those lines affect your composition.
Knowing to like think of lines of text as lines instead of the actual words, that's how you can tell like the way that he's put this poster together. He's thinking the same way.
So if we take that idea and we look at the way that the poster is set together, like if you took where the picture of the money is, that's there, and you did a block around that, and you did a block on the other side, like that's a really smart way to continue me left to right, right? It keeps going me left to right. And those lines of copy that pull me top to bottom. And then you put those lines of the type that are going vertical, you put those in there and it's like, okay, now I get why it's placed there. There's an empty spot there and it needs to be filled with something. So let's make it small, because if it's big, it takes away from the big typography that's there. So everything, like this whole poster could be broken down into shapes and you'd understand why it works.
how hard is it to make sure that with something symbols like this that are so universal and so done, how hard is it to make sure that you don't get gimmicky or sort of like overblown with them, or you use them in the wrong way? Is it hard to thread that needle?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to thread that needle because it's like, I mean, you can look across the board at design and you could ask that question about logos, about book design, about all these other things. It's like, where do you balance these things that are pretty ubiquitous to mean something, and how do you make it not feel cheesy? Like, I think that's the balance that every designer is trying to do. Is like, I don't want to be cheesy ever. Like, that's not what I want. Not in the verbiage, not in the graphic. You know, I don't want to be that predictability, because if I am, then why is someone paying me to do this? Someone else could do this predictable trope about something. So the fact that he has blood and he has like drips, but they're not so overdone that it feels horror movie. Like, I don't look at that and be like, oh, that's a cheap like horror movie flick. Like, I don't feel that way. I feel very sophisticated, and it's like, it's the same way with cooking. A good example is cooking. Like, if you watch any of these cooking shows, they always say like, edit, 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 simplify, simplify, simplify. You have too many things on the dish. Design, it's like, you can have too many things, or sometimes you don't have enough things. The example I give, and it's hard to show with here, but I'm gonna do it with my hands. Picture like you have two rooms, right? So you have like the bottom floor and here's the ceiling, right? And here's your idea, right? The idea is the pencil. And so you want to push this idea so far, so far, so far that it bends the floor but doesn't push through. Because as soon as you push through, you're actually now to another set of ideas. So when you look at something, if I'm looking at this floor and I'm sitting somewhere where my thumb is, you're in the middle. You either need to go down, right, to be more minimal or less, or you need to rise up and push your idea further. So you need to decide where that balance is, so you're not what I call stuck in the middle. Like, if you're stuck in the middle, it means you haven't made the decision what you want to do. Like this poster, his poster has decided to be aggressive, and it doesn't back down from being aggressive. And so it's finding that balance, and that's a challenge. And again, that's what makes a good designer, is knowing where to stop, knowing where that balance is, knowing when to push, knowing when to pull back, knowing where to push 3 steps instead of 1. It's finding that balance within the design.